Imagine walking through the quiet, wind-swept plains of Montana, where the soil holds secrets deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rewrite human history. We thought we had the story of the first Americans all figured out. We had a timeline, we had a route, and we had a group of people known as the Clovis, the pioneers who allegedly stepped onto a pristine continent and claimed it as their own. But what if I told you that a single tiny discovery, found by accident in a remote corner of the American West, blew that entire narrative apart? What if the DNA of one single individual did what thousands of stone tools couldn't do? It changed everything. Today we are diving deep into the DNA of the only Clovis individual ever found. A discovery so profound that it shattered long-held theories and forced scientists to rethink the very blueprint of how humanity conquered the New World. This isn't just a story about ancient bones. It is a story about us, our ancestors, and a genetic legacy that stretches across thousands of miles and tens of thousands of years. To understand why this is such a massive deal, we first have to talk about who the Clovis people were in our collective imagination. For a long time, the Clovis first model was the undisputed king of American archaeology. The idea was simple. About 13,000 years ago, as the great ice sheets of the last ice age began to melt, a corridor opened up between the massive glaciers covering Canada. Through this narrow gap, a group of intrepid hunters from Siberia migrated across the Bering Land Bridge and spilled out into the vast, untouched landscapes of North America. They brought with them a very specific technology, a beautifully crafted fluted stone point that we now call the Clovis point. Throughout the mid-20th century, these points were being found all over the United States, from the East Coast to the West, always in layers of earth dating back to that same narrow window of time. It seemed like an open and shut case. These were the first people. They were the ancestors of everyone who came later. But then, the cracks started to show. Archaeologists began finding sites that were older than the Clovis, much older. Sites like Monteverde in Chile or the Gott site in Texas hinted that people had been here long before that ice-free corridor ever opened. However, even as the Clovis first model started to crumble, one massive mystery remained. Who were the Clovis people genetically? Were they a distinct group that arrived later? Were they related to the people who were already here? Or were they the direct ancestors of modern indigenous populations? For the longest time, we had no way of knowing because despite finding thousands of their stone tools, we had never found their remains. No burials, no bones, nothing that could give us a genetic profile, until we found the Anzac child. The story of this discovery begins back in 1968, on a ranch in Wilsall, Montana, owned by the Anzac family. Two construction workers were digging near a rock outcrop when they stumbled upon something extraordinary. It wasn't just a skeleton, it was a ritual cache. Buried under layers of bright red ochre were more than 100 stone and bone tools, including the iconic Clovis points. And among these tools were the fragile remains of a young boy, no more than 2 years old. This was it. This was the holy grail of American archaeology. But back in 1968, we didn't have the technology to sequence ancient DNA. The remains were kept in private storage for decades, a silent witness to a past we couldn't yet read. It wasn't until 2014 that an international team of scientists was finally able to extract and analyze the boy's genome. And when they did, the results sent shockwaves through the scientific community. This puts the Anzac child right at the end of the Clovis era, making him a perfect representative of that culture. But it was the DNA that told the real story. When the researchers compared the boy's genome to modern populations around the world, they found something incredible. The Anzac child was not related to Europeans, and he wasn't a mysterious outlier. He was directly ancestral to many of the indigenous populations of Central and South America. This was the smoking gun. It proved that the Clovis people were not a separate migration that went extinct or was replaced. They were the literal ancestors of the people living in the Americas today. But it gets even more complicated and interesting. If the Anzac child is related to people in South America, what does that say about the migration patterns? It suggests that the Clovis culture didn't just stay in the north. They moved, and they moved fast. Within a few centuries, their descendants had spread across the entire hemisphere, carrying their genes and their culture from the plains of Montana all the way down to the tip of Patagonia. This means the genetic map of the Americas is far more unified than we ever imagined. But wait, there is a twist. While the Anzic child showed a clear link to Central and South American groups, the connection to modern North American indigenous populations was more complex. It turns out that some groups in the North have additional genetic influences that weren't present in the Anzic boy. This discovery also settled a long-standing and controversial theory called the Solutrean hypothesis. This theory suggested that the Clovis people might have actually come from Europe, crossing the Atlantic ice bridge from what is now France and Spain. Proponents of this idea pointed to similarities between Clovis points and the stone tools of the Solutrean culture in Europe. It was a flashy theory, and it got a lot of media attention, but the DNA of the Anzic child completely debunked it. There was zero European ancestry in his genome. He was purely of East Asian and Siberian descent, confirming that the first Americans did indeed come across the Bering Land Bridge. The similarities in the tools were simply a case of convergent evolution. Two different cultures coming up with a similar solution to the same problem. Now, let's talk about what this means for our understanding of human adaptability. Think about the world the Anzic child lived in. The landscape was dominated by megafauna, massive mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. The climate was volatile, as the world transitioned out of the Ice Age. Yet, within a remarkably short period, these people developed a sophisticated toolkit, established complex social structures, and mapped out an entire continent. They were a highly mobile, highly successful population that laid the genetic foundation for an entire half of the planet. But the Anzic boy isn't the only piece of the puzzle. Recently, more advanced genomic studies have been looking at other ancient remains across the Americas, and they are finding a much more dynamic story of movement. We used to think of the migration into the Americas as a single event, a one-and-done stroll across a land bridge. The DNA suggests it was much more like a series of pulses. There was an early arrival, likely before 15,000 years ago, and in some cases, moved back north. It was a constant flow of people and ideas. Another fascinating revelation from the Anzic DNA is the connection to a ghostly population known as the Malta boy, found in Siberia and dating back 24,000 years. The Malta boy's DNA showed that he was a mix of Western Eurasian and East Asian lineages. When scientists compared the Anzic boy to him, they found a match. Roughly one-third of the Anzic child's ancestry comes from this ancient North Eurasian population. This means that the first Americans weren't just a simple branch of East Asians. They were a unique mixture of peoples who came together in the heart of Siberia or Beringia before they ever set foot in North America. This genetic cocktail is what makes indigenous American DNA so distinct from anything else found in the world. Let's pause for a second and think about the scale of this. We are talking about a journey that spans half the globe and tens of thousands of years. From the frozen steppes of Siberia to the lush rainforests of the Amazon, the genetic trail of the Anzic child's relatives is everywhere. It's a testament to the incredible resilience and curiosity of our species. But the discovery of the Anzic child also brought up a lot of ethical questions. For a long time, the scientific community struggled with how to handle ancient remains, often ignoring the wishes of modern indigenous communities who feel a deep ancestral connection to these individuals. The Anzic case was different. The researchers worked closely with the Crow tribe and other Montana tribes to ensure that the study was done respectfully. Once the DNA analysis was complete, the remains of the Anzic child were reburied in a traditional ceremony at the original discovery site. It was a bridge between the ancient past and the present, a moment of reconciliation between science and tradition. But the science didn't stop there. The Anzic child gave us the baseline, but now we are looking for the outliers. For example, recent studies in the Amazon have found traces of DNA that don't match the Anzic boy or any known early American lineages. Instead, they show a faint but unmistakable link to Australasian populations, people from Australia, Papua New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. How did that get there? Did a different group of people cross the Pacific? Or was there an even more ancient and complex route through Beringia that we haven't mapped yet? This is what scientists call Population Y, and it is the new frontier of American archaeology. The Anzic DNA proved that the Clovis were the ancestors of the majority, but it also opened the door to the possibility that they weren't the only ones here. Imagine the American landscape 14,000 years ago. It wasn't an empty wilderness. It was a patchwork of different cultures and groups, perhaps speaking different languages and using different technologies. The Clovis might have been the most visible because of their iconic spear points, But the DNA is telling us that the human story here is much richer and more layered. Every time we sequence a new ancient genome, the map gets more crowded and more interesting. We are moving away from the idea of a single migration and moving toward a model of a great American melting pot that began as soon as the first person crossed the land bridge. This brings us to a crucial question. If the Clovis were so successful and their genes spread so far, why did the Clovis culture itself disappear so suddenly? The distinctive fluted points vanished from the archaeological record. For a long time, people thought the Clovis had been wiped out by a comet or a sudden climate shift. But the DNA tells a different story. If the people were still there, as the Anzac child's genetic legacy proves, then it wasn't the people who disappeared, it was the lifestyle. The environment was changing. The mammoths were going extinct. The large-scale hunting of the Ice Age was no longer sustainable. The people did what humans do best. They adapted. They broke into smaller groups, focused on local resources, and changed their technology to fit their new reality. The Clovis didn't go away. They evolved. Now let's look at the broader impact of this discovery on the world of science. Before the Anzac boy, the field of ancient DNA was mostly focused on Europe and the Middle East. This study proved that the Americas are a goldmine for understanding human history. It sparked a new wave of research that is currently sweeping across the continent. We are now looking at ancient DNA from cave sites in the Yucatan, from high-altitude burials in the Andes, and from underwater sites in the Great Lakes. Each one is a new piece of the puzzle, but the Anzac child remains the cornerstone. He is the anchor that holds the whole timeline together. Think about the sheer luck involved in this. Out of all the thousands of Clovis people who lived over several centuries, the remains of only one child survived well enough for us to sequence his DNA. One child who lived for thousands of days, 13 millennia ago, has become our primary witness to the origin story of a whole continent. It is a reminder of how fragile history is and how much we owe to these rare glimpses into the past. Without that accidental discovery in Montana, we might still be arguing about the Solutrean hypothesis or wondering if the Clovis were a dead-end lineage. Instead, we have a clear genetic line that connects the past to the present. The Anzac discovery also forces us to reconsider the concept of the frontier. We often think of the frontier as a place where people are alone, interconnected network. They were moving genes and ideas across vast distances. The fact that the Anzac child's relatives ended up in South America so quickly suggests a level of organization and exploration that is mind-boggling. They weren't just wandering aimlessly. They were purposeful. They were explorers in the truest sense of the word. And let's not forget the tools found with the child. This wasn't just a random burial. It was a cache of some of the finest craftsmanship of the ancient world. The stone used for the tools came from hundreds of miles away, showing that even back then people had trade networks and a deep knowledge of the geography. The red ochre, which is often associated with ritual and meaning in ancient cultures, tells us that they had a complex spiritual life. They cared for their children, they honored their ancestors, and they had a sense of beauty and artistry. The DNA gives us the biological facts, but the artifacts give us the human soul. The Anzac study provided scientific validation for oral traditions that have always maintained they have been here since time immemorial. While the scientific timeline of 15,000 years might not match the literal interpretation of some creation stories, the genetic link proves a deep, unbroken connection to the land that predates any other culture. It reinforces the idea of indigeneity as a biological and historical reality, not just a social construct. As we look toward the future, the study of the Anzac DNA is leading to even more sophisticated techniques. We are now able to look at environmental DNA, extracting the genetic signatures of ancient people from the very dirt they walked on, even if no bones are present. This means that in the coming years, we might find more Clovis genetic signatures in sites where we previously only found stone tools. The map is going to get even more detailed. We might find that there were different branches of the Clovis, or that they moved in directions we never expected. The DNA of the Anzac child is like a light that was turned on in a dark room. For a long time, we were feeling our way around, trying to figure out the shape of history based on the tools and the bones we could find. Now, we can see the connections. We can see the family tree. We can see the movement of people across the face of the earth. It is a story of incredible journey, of survival, and of the enduring legacy of a group of people who changed the world forever. But what about the things we still don't know? Even with the Anzic genome, there are massive gaps. We still don't know exactly when the first people arrived. Was it 20,000 years ago? 30,000? The DNA suggests a window, but it doesn't give us a hard date. We also don't know the exact route they took. Was it along the coast? By boat? On foot? The genetic diversity we see in South America suggests a coastal route might have been much faster and more efficient, allowing people to bypass the ice sheets and reach the southern hemisphere earlier than we thought. But we need more samples to be sure. The story of the first Americans is not a single narrative. It's an epic saga with 1,000 different characters and plot lines. The Anzic child is just one chapter, but he is the chapter that changed the way we read the rest of the book. As we wrap our heads around this, it's important to remember that science is not a static collection of facts. It's a process. Every discovery, like the Anzic child, is a step toward a better understanding, but it also raises new questions. It challenges our assumptions and forces us to be humble in the face of the past. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. And that is the beauty of it. The mystery of the first Americans is one of the greatest puzzles in human history, and we are lucky enough to be living in the era where we are finally starting to solve it. So the next time you see a picture of a Clovis point, don't just think of it as a piece of ancient technology. Think of the hands that made it. Think of the child who was buried with it. And think of the genetic thread that connects that child to millions of people living today. The DNA of the Anzic boy is a reminder that we are all part of a long, incredible journey. We are the descendants of explorers, of survivors, and of pioneers who saw a new world and decided to make it home. The story of the Clovis isn't just history, it's our story. As we continue to explore the DNA of the ancient Americans, we are seeing a picture emerge that is far more vibrant than the old black and white models of the past. We are seeing a continent that was alive with movement, a place where different groups met and merged, creating a unique human tapestry. The Anzic child was a part of that tapestry, a single thread that has helped us reveal the entire pattern. And as technology improves and we find more pieces of the puzzle, the picture will only get clearer. We are on the verge of a new understanding of our origins, one that is grounded in the very code of life itself. It's amazing how much a tiny fragment of bone can tell us. It can tell us where we came from, who we are related to, and how our ancestors lived. It can debunk myths and confirm legends. The Anzic child has given us a gift that is truly priceless, a window into a world that was lost for thousands of years. And as we look through that window, we see a reflection of ourselves, a species that is always moving, always learning, and always looking toward the horizon. The journey of the first Americans is one of the most remarkable chapters in the human story, and thanks to the DNA of one little boy in Montana, we finally know how it began. Think about the implications for how we view human migration as a whole. For a long time, we viewed history as a series of separate events in separate places. But the DNA revolution, spearheaded by finds like the Anzic child, is showing us that humanity is much more interconnected than we ever realized. The people of the Americas weren't isolated in a vacuum. They were part of a global movement of populations that had been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. The same genetic markers found in ancient Siberians show up in Montana, then in Mexico, then in Brazil. It's a continuous chain of life. This also changes how we think about the concept of discovery. We often say that Columbus discovered America, or that the Clovis were the first to discover it, but the truth is much more complex. The discovery of the Americas was a process that took thousands of years and involved countless groups of people. Each group discovered a new valley, a new river, a new way of life. The Anzic child's people were just one part of this ongoing discovery. They weren't just the first. They were part of a long lineage of people who were constantly redefining what it meant to be American. As we look at the data coming out of recent studies, we see that the legacy of the Clovis is still very much alive. Significant portions of the genomes of modern South American and Central American populations can be traced directly back to the group the Anzic child belonged to. This isn't just ancient history. It's modern biology. It's a living link to the Ice Age. When you realize that the descendants of the people who hunted mammoths are still here, living and thriving, it changes your perspective on time. But in the grander scheme of human history, it's just a blink of an eye. The Anzic child's DNA also highlights the importance of preserving archaeological sites. We only have this information because the Anzic family and the original discoverers recognized that these remains were important. If they had been ignored or destroyed, we would have lost a vital piece of our history. It's a reminder that there are still countless secrets buried in the earth, waiting to be found. Whether it's a tiny bone fragment or a meticulously crafted stone tool, every artifact has the potential to rewrite the history books. In the end, the story of the Anzic child is a story of hope and connection. It's a story that brings us together by showing us our shared heritage. It reminds us that no matter where we come from, we are all part of the same human family, with a history that is more beautiful and complex than we ever could have imagined. As we continue to uncover the secrets of the past, we are not just learning about ancient people, we are learning about ourselves. And that is the most important discovery of all. As scientists continue to analyze the data, the Anzic child's genome showed no signs of the genetic bottlenecks that can plague small, isolated populations. This suggests that the Clovis were part of a large, healthy, and interconnected population. They weren't a small band struggling to survive. They were a thriving society with a robust gene pool. This genetic diversity was likely one of the keys to their success, allowing them to adapt to the wildly different environments they encountered as they moved south. This discovery has also spurred a renewed interest in the environment of the late Pleistocene. By understanding the people, we are motivated to understand the world they lived in. We are looking more closely at the plants they gathered, the animals they hunted, and the climate they endured. As the ice retreated, it created opportunities, and the ancestors of the Anzic boy were ready to take them. What's truly exciting is that we are just at the beginning. The technology used to sequence the Anzic child's DNA is already being surpassed by newer, faster, and more accurate methods. We are starting to look at ancient proteins, which can survive even longer than DNA. We are looking at the isotopes in teeth to track where people moved during their lifetimes. The future of archaeology is not just in the shovel and the brush, it's in the lab and the supercomputer. And as these tools get better, the story of the first Americans will continue to evolve. The Anzic child's DNA has fundamentally changed our understanding of the first Americans. It has settled old debates, sparked new ones, and provided a direct genetic link between the ancient past and the modern world. It has shown us that the Clovis were not a mysterious, extinct group, but the direct ancestors of millions of people. It has proven that the story of the Americas is a story of movement, adaptation, and resilience. One small child, buried in a red ochre grave 13,000 years ago, has finally spoken, and his message is clear: we have been here for a long time. We have traveled great distances, and we are all connected. It's a powerful thought to end on. The idea that a single individual can bridge the gap between two very different worlds. The world of the mammoth hunters and our modern technological world. We are often so focused on our differences that we forget our shared origins. The Anzic child reminds us that our history is written in our very cells. We carry the legacy of the pioneers who crossed the land bridge in every one of our heartbeats. Their curiosity is our curiosity. Their strength is our strength. And their story is, and always will be, our story. As we move forward, let's keep that sense of wonder and curiosity alive. Let's keep asking questions and seeking answers, because the story of human history is never truly finished. There is always another site to discover, another genome to sequence, and another secret to uncover. The Anzic child was just the beginning. Who knows what we'll find next? Whatever it is, you can be sure it will be just as fascinating, just as surprising, and just as important for understanding who we are and where we came from. The story of the Anzic DNA is a masterclass in how modern science can illuminate the deepest mysteries of our past. It shows us that even when the trail seems cold, there are always clues left behind. It just takes the right technology and the right questions to find them. The boy from Montana may have died young, but his legacy is immortal. He has provided us with a map of our past, a way to navigate the complex history of our species in the New World. And for that, he will always be one of the most important figures in the history of science. This discovery really puts into perspective how little of the human story is actually recorded in books. For the vast majority of our time on this planet, we didn't leave behind written records. We left behind tools, footprints, and our DNA. Decoding those silent records is the great challenge and the great privilege of modern archaeology. The Anzic child is a reminder of how much of our history is still out there, buried in the soil, waiting for us to find it. It's a call to action for all of us to stay curious, to keep exploring and to never stop looking for the truth about our origins. The genetic data from the Anzac boy is also being used to help modern indigenous communities trace their own ancestral roots. It's providing a level of detail that was previously impossible. This is a powerful tool for people looking to reclaim their history and their identity. It's a way to connect with ancestors who lived in a world so different from our own, yet who shared the same fundamental human experiences. The Anzac child's legacy is not just scientific, it's personal. In closing, the DNA of the Anzac child didn't just change what we know about the first Americans. It changed how we know it. It shifted the focus from stone tools to the people themselves. It gave a face and a family to a culture that was previously known only through its artifacts. It showed us that the history of the Americas is a human story, filled with struggle, triumph, and an incredible capacity for survival. The Anzac child has taken his place in history as one of our most important ancestors. A young boy who 13,000 years later is still teaching us what it means to be human. The mystery of the first Americans is a journey we are all on together. Every new discovery, every new piece of DNA brings us closer to the truth. And as we continue to explore the past, we are also discovering the future. The same spirit of exploration that brought the Clovis to the Americas is what drives us to explore the stars today. It's the same human curiosity, the same desire to see what's over the next hill. From the Bering Land Bridge to the lunar surface, the journey continues. And the Anzac child is right there with us, a silent reminder of how far we've come and how much further we can go.